Hi, welcome back to the Ramblings of a Trucker. In this video, I want to talk about Satnav, GPS, its benefits, its failings, and future problems. I use Satnav. What I don't do is rely on it. And that's because whilst I've been trying various navigation aids, I've found that they're certainly not perfect, and they have got me in a bit of a pickle. So anyway, GPS, Satnav, when was it introduced? When was it created? I know a lot of you think it's a new thing. Would you be surprised if I told you it was created in the 1970s? And it wasn't until the 1980s when the first consumer units were introduced. So, 45 years old. It's not new technology. And despite being 45 years old, it still gets it wrong. Now, the older drivers, like myself, I'm only 54. I know I don't look it. We cut our teeth on maps, Philips Navigator, fantastic map, particularly if you're doing agriculture, because it shows you every farm by name. And then the bridge map, trusty Trucker's bridge map, which now it shows low bridges and weak bridges and weight limits. So it's moved on from just the bridge map that I used when I started trucking. So GPS, it's a useful tool. It's great for showing me where delays are on the road. So even though I might be doing a route that I do every week, or sometimes every day, every week, I'll punch in, I'm going from this address to that address, and it will show me where there's delays, roadworks, things like that. But I don't need to know the route, because I just know my way around the country. I'm one of those people. I can go somewhere once and that's it. I can remember it and I can recall that months, years later. And I know not everyone is. And there's a massive objection to the next generation of truckers from there. They don't want to learn how to use a map or even use a map. They've got their electronic device and they think it's going to get them everywhere that they want to go without any problems. And it's not. It really isn't. If you're just going up and down the motorway, you're going from industrial estate to industrial estate, of course it's going to get that right. But if that's all you're doing, do you really need a Satnav? Don't switch off yet, because towards the end of the video, I'm going to reference a program that I heard. And it's quite worrying about how vulnerable GPS is in the future. So, learning to use a map, why would you want to? Well, technology fails. You know, how many times have you've had an electronic device, you've used it, you've put it away, you bring it out, you try to turn it on, it's dead. It's a brick. Mobile phones, cameras, all sorts of things. All of a sudden they just stop working. It's not unusual. And the same can happen with your Satnav. Now, a lot of you might say, well, I'll just use my phone, use Google Maps. Google Maps isn't ideal for trucks because you can't put in your dimensions and your weights. So it'll route you as if you're a car or a motorbike. And again, it can get you into a lot of trouble. So you can download an app. Several apps. My mate uses Copilot. Dino, morning mate. He uses Copilot, and I tried it because I used it years ago when it was first introduced, about 20 years ago, and I was just curious. You know, I wonder how it's come on. So I installed it on my phone, entered the postcode of where I was going. It was perfect. for about the first 90 minutes, and then it tried to send me over the Peak District, over a high pass that had a 7.5 ton weight limit on, even though I'd entered the weight of the vehicle. So immediately binned that off. And I've been trying a few, because at some point there will be a good one, and there will be one that possibly doesn't make mistakes, but I haven't found one yet. So I just keep trying them. So I've tried the TomTom truck app. Again, you know, it's trying to send me down weight limited roads. Not all the time, but every now and again. And you've only got to go down one and get it wrong and have a copper see you, and that's it. You could be up in front of the traffic commissioner. Your licence could be in jeopardy. It's just not worth it. So what else have I tried? Eurowag Navi. Used to be Road Lords. When it was Road Lords, it was a bit of fun, really, because if you and your mates all used the app, there was like a leaderboard, and it would show who'd done the most mileage each week and who'd done the most mileage in a year and things like that. But that was pretty good. And it also had some additional features which I think were a real benefit. You could add a point of interest. So you could add a lay-by or a parking area. You could, if you stopped somewhere like a truck stop, you could say what facilities were available. Yes, it had showers. Yes, it had toilets. Yes, food was available, etc., etc. And it would update it for everyone that was using it. Fantastic system, really was, and completely free. No subscription, no payment, nothing. It's still out there now. Eurowag Navi, it's called. Strange name, but it's European, and that's probably how it translates. Inbuilt navigation aids built into trucks. I've used the DAF one. Really didn't like that. Yes, it avoided all the weight limits, but it was quite clunky. It would reboot often during a drive, and you had to put some of the DAF software on your phone, and when you were using the Satnav, it would pull the data from your phone, so it basically hogged your phone, made your phone unusable for other things. That was a bit of a pain in the ass. The Scania one that I've got, so far, it's pretty good, but it's not as good as me. So a regular route I do is Immingham to Rugby, and if I punch it into this, it always sends me on the shortest route, which is down via Lincoln, down the 15, down the 46, down to Leicester, down to Lutterworth, and then it'll send me via Magna Park and through some villages and into the arse end of Rugby. Now, the reason it does that is, in terms of mileage, it's shorter, but it thinks it's quicker. But I've set off on that route, and I've done that route many times, and I've clocked exactly how long it takes. And then I've gone the other way, all the way across the M180, down the M18, down the M1, off at junction 20 and straight into Rugby that way. There's absolutely no difference in terms of time, but it still tells me that the Lincoln one is faster. And it doesn't give an alternative when there is an alternative. And sometimes you don't want to follow the sat-nav. So let me give you an example. I know I'm out all week, and I know on this particular day I'm going to be out of time in about 2 hours, and my journey is going to be 3.5 hours. And the sat-nav is trying to send me a particular route. Now, because I know that route, it's up here, and I know where the lay-bys and industrial estates are, where it's safe to park, I'll look at it and I'll think, right, so if I've got a couple of hours left, that ain't going to get me anywhere that's nice and safe and quiet to park. So ditch the sat-nav, use the real intelligence, and I'll take a route, and it might be 5 mile longer, 10 mile longer, 15 minutes longer, I don't know. But by going the way that I want to go, instead of the way that this AI device is telling me to go, I can end up parking in a nice place that's safe, that's quiet, so I get a good sleep. And then I go back en route in the morning. And this is why you can't rely on Satnav. Now, the reason for this video is because I've just listened to a programme on BBC Radio 4. It's called Inside Science. It was broadcast on the 29th of January. I don't know when it was repeated or when it was first aired before then. But it highlights the vulnerability of Satnav. And I think the title of the show was something like, should we change our view on GPS or something like that? Or should we stop relying on GPS? And basically, Russia has started jamming the GPS signal for ships and planes flying over the Baltic or sailing on the Baltic. Now, at the moment, that's all they're doing. But they're able to, one, jam the signal so that the ships don't know where they are. They're able to also send false satellite signals to the GPS unit so the ship thinks it's in the wrong place. Now, the consequences of this are that the ship might think it's in deep water and it could be heading for some rocks or some shallow water where it gets grounded. In terms of aircraft, because they've been doing it with aircraft, the pilots, they get up to a cruising altitude, they autopilot and they chill out. That only works whilst the GPS system has got a signal. And when the Russians have been intercepting it, it's turned off the autopilot, all the bells and whistles go off in the cockpit, and they have to fly it manually using a compass. Old school, but it works, it's reliable. Now, if you really wanted to cripple a country and its economy, if you only had 25% of the drivers in that country who are completely reliant on Satnav, GPS, if you could interfere with those signals, that country would be on its knees. And I joked about this when satellite navigation was introduced in the 80s, because people were going out and they were buying these units and they were using them for everything. How to get to their aunties. It's like, well, you've been going to your aunties since you were born. Surely you know the way. Yeah, but it's technology. You've got to use the technology. It's the future. And they're using it to go to the shop and using it to go to McDonald's and to go to the supermarket. And they're using it for journeys that they already know. And over time, they become overly reliant on it. Let me tell you a story. It's about a guy I worked with. Wolfie, I hope you're still alive and kicking, mate. I hope you're enjoying retirement in Thailand. I hope you don't mind me talking about this incident. So, we were both working for the same company, and every year I got put on a particular contract, and I was basically doing traction for another company. And a lot of the traction I was doing was from Aylesbury to Carlisle, because they had a depot in Carlisle, depot in Aylesbury, and it was stuff going into long-term storage. So I'd go down to Aylesbury, pick up one of their trailers that had a couple of ISO shipping containers on, up to Carlisle, they'd offload the boxes, and I'd either come down empty or I'd bring some containers that were coming out of deep storage. And sometimes I was on it on my own. I'd do 5 days or 6 days, depending on the workload and my hours. But sometimes they needed to move more stuff. And so they'd ask me to ring my manager and ask for another driver to come and help me. So this particular day, Wolfie rocks up. I think it was Tuesday or a Wednesday. I'd already done 1 or 2 runs on my own. And so Wolfie rocks up. I'd just woken up. I'd spent the night in their depot at Aylesbury. And Wolfie said, right, he said, what's the crack, Al? I said, right, we'll pick up one of their flat trailers. There'll be 2 containers on it. We run up to Carlisle, they'll crane them off, they'll put 2 more back on, and we come back down here and swap trailers. Okay, sounds easy enough. So we coupled up to his trailers, we're just about to set off, and he says, have you got the postcode for where we're going? I said, you don't need it, mate. I said, follow me, we're running together for a couple of days. No, he says, I've got my Satnav. He said, I like to put it in, I like the postcode. So come off at Carlisle and it's at the back of Stobart's. So go as if you're going into Stobart's and it's the unit behind it. No, I want the postcode. I said, well, go in and see John and get the postcode. Hi, John, if you're watching. John Prentice, fab guy. So he goes in, comes out, he said, I've got the postcode. He said, how long do you think it'll take us, Al? I said, 5 hours, 35 minutes, give or take. No, I'll see what my Satnav says. So he punches in the postcode. 5 hours, 36. Yeah, I told you. I've been doing this 9 months a year for about 5 years. Right, after you, Wolfie. No, I'll follow you, Al. I'll follow you. So, despite the fact he'd gone and got the postcode, he put into his Satnav, he insisted on using the Satnav, he still followed me. So off we went. We ran his time out, we had his break, we carried on. Sure enough, we got up to Carlisle. 5 hours, 35 minutes, or it might have been 5:36 or 5:37. You get the idea. So we swapped containers. We were keeping the same trailers this trip. Swapped the containers, and he says, right, Al, he says, what are we doing now? I said, we're going back down to Aylesbury. Have you got the postcode? I said, you've just come from there, Wolfie. You've followed me up. You're going to follow me back. Yeah, but I want the postcode. I said, well, we'll run down to Wigan. We'll have a night out in Wigan, and then we'll do the rest of them. I want the postcode. Okay, go up and get the postcode off Lol. Hi, Lol, if you're watching. So he went up, came back down. Right, I've got the postcode. Punched it in. 5 hours, 37. Well, it will be, Wolfie. It's just taking us that to get up here from the same place. So we set off, and sure enough, we got to Wigan, parked on an industrial estate, had us 9 hours off, got up in the morning, bish bash bosh, down to Aylesbury, but all that way he followed me. And Wolfie is one of those people who, at that point, he'd got far more experience than me. He'd been driving longer than me, he'd had more jobs than me, but he'd become completely reliant on the Satnav, dependent on the Satnav, instead of using his brain. And he was a fab guy. I hope he's still around. And so you can't rely on these boxes. You've got to have an alternative, because if we have a fallout, the UK has a fallout with Putin, or America, or Iran, or any of these countries that have got the ability to jam GPS signals, where does that leave you and your job? Now, prior to listening to that programme, if someone had said to me, one day they're just going to cut off the GPS, I used to joke about it. And I thought, well, it's possible, but I can't see it happening. Well, now it is happening. Not to vehicles, not yet. But they've proved that they've got the technology to do it to ships and do it to aircraft. So it's only a matter of time before they just think, you know what, we're just going to absolutely annihilate their distribution network, because their drivers, they're wholly dependent on GPS. Let's kill that signal. Let's make it so that they don't know where they are. And I can foresee there'll be drivers, and they'll be bimbling along, following their navigation aid, and all of a sudden it'll go off. No satellite signal. And they won't know what to do. They won't know where they are. If the boss rings them, where are you? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know where you are? You're meant to be a professional driver. And that's the other thing. If a customer or your employer rings you up and they want to know where you are, or if you break down and you need to relay where you are to get assistance, if you just keep following it, to turn left in 500 yards, follow this road for 43 miles, you need to know where you are and not just where you're going or where you've been. If you see a road sign, you know, you're going up the A46, A46 closed at the B, blah, 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 blah. Well, is that before the A52 or after? Could I divert on the A52? A professional driver will know. I know where that is. If I nip off at this road, go along to the roundabout, hook a left, it'll run parallel, and then eventually I'll get to such and such a village and I can go left and end up back on the A46. That, to me, is a professional driver. I can go into any job, any driving job, anywhere in any European country and say, whatever truck you give me and whatever load you give me, I can get it from A to B without a Satnav. I can go into a town or a city and I will find where it needs to be or where it's getting collected from without a Satnav. I can do it. Just give me a couple of maps. Give me a bridge map and give me a Phillips Navigator or the European equivalent. And it's just what I do. Some of you may know, some of you may not. I established and I used to own Spanish motorbike tours. And whilst I was running that out in Spain, I had a GPS, a Garmin, on my motorbike. But I never used it for navigation. I used it to plot where I'd been. So that when I got home, I'd plug the Garmin into my computer and I could see all the trails that I'd been riding, all the off-road trails. And I could see the ones that were dead ends and I could delete them. And I could form nice circular routes of 99% off-road trails. And I could give them to my guests because I had a property on Airbnb that was off-grid. So a lot of motorbikers used to come over for some adventure bike riding. And I could go out and guide them because I knew the roads. Or I could just say, here you go, there's the GPX files. I've plotted these for you. Off you go, have some fun. So they're a tool, but you can't rely on them. You really can't. I'll give you one more story. Excuse me. So I'm driving a tipper at the moment. Where I used to work, we used to do aggregates and agriculture. So you might be going to a farm and picking up wheat or picking up barley and taking it to be malted into, then used for beer. And one place in particular, I can't remember the name of the farm, but basically the guy said, you've got to come up from Huntingdon towards Wisbech. He says, and as you're going up there, he says, I'll give you a postcode. He said, you need to turn left. He says, and stop and ring me. I said, okay. So he gave me this postcode. Now I'd got the details of his farm and his phone number, but the stuff I was picking up wasn't at his farm. It was at what they call a satellite farm, which could basically just be a barn in the middle of a field or next to some fields. So he gives me this postcode, I punch it in and I'm following it, and sure enough, I go around this bend and it's saying turn left, you've reached your destination. So I took the left turn and there's just two little farm cottages, nothing to do with that farmer. So I pulled up to the side of the road and I stopped and I rang him like he said. He says, right, he says, you got a pen and paper? I said, I don't need one. I said, just give me the directions and I'll follow it. He says, right, he says, where are you picking up from? It doesn't have an address and it doesn't have a postcode. He said, that's why I had to get you to stop here, and now you're going to follow my instructions and you'll get to the field where this product is. It's okay. It's right, he says, you follow along this road and the tarmac will end, it'll become a dirt track. He says, you'll go round a right-hand bend, you'll go round a left-hand bend, you'll go over a little bridge. He says, you'll go over another bridge. He says, and then the road will fork. He says, take the right-hand fork, go up there. He says, and you'll see a bridge going over one of the dikes. He says, just before that, there's a left turn. He says, it's a narrow track, not like the one you've been on. He says, take that left turn. He says, follow that, and you'll see some buildings on your left-hand side. He says, go past them. He says, and eventually, the road will bend round to the right, and then there'll be a left turn or a straight on. He says, take that left turn. Go along there, over a bridge. He says, and you'll go through a little forest, a little group of trees. He says, you go through the trees, stay on the track. He says, and you'll go through an open gate. And once you're through that open gate, you'll see a barn on your right-hand side. He says, that's where we're loading you in the morning. He says, you can park up there. He says, I'll see you at 6:30. You would never be able to get there with a GPS. Never, ever. You had to be able to follow instructions when you're doing agricultural work. You have to be able to liaise with farmers. And you've got to put your trust in them. Even if you get a job and it's got a, home farm, such and such a village and a postcode, you've got to ring that farmer and say, I'm coming to collect your wheat. I'm an hour away. What do I need to know about getting to your farm? Because often the postcode is for where Royal Mail push the letters through the letterbox, for the front door, not for the HGV entrance. And sometimes what you're picking up isn't there. It's at a remote farm, a satellite farm. Now, those kind of jobs, they pay good money. If you want to drive for a supermarket, get 35, 40 grand a year, that's fine. If you want to start earning 60, 70 grand a year, you've got to have that kind of knowledge and that kind of experience. You've got to be able to liaise with the farmer, understand verbal instructions, find your way to really remote places and not rely on your GPS. And this is why when I get new drivers, and I've trained a few, that they've passed, they've done the CPC and they think they know it all. And it's like, right, we're going to this farm. Okay, what's the postcode? Don't work like that, son. And you've got to try and educate them. And your first 20 farms, the postcode might be spot on. And you might be able to punch it into your Satnav and get straight there. And then you'll get one and it won't work. Or you'll end up getting stuck because you're following your Satnav. You think it's the best thing to get you from A to B. And really, experience and someone at the other end of the phone giving you directions is often better. A lot of you are going to disagree with this. And a lot of the older drivers are going to say, fucking hell, Alan, you've got that absolutely spot on. Nailed it, son. Nailed it. And it's because the people that disagree haven't done the jobs I've done and the people who agree with me have done. And like it or not, if you want to earn top money, you've got to be able to act without your Satnav. You've got to be able to follow instructions. Some housing estates, they're not even on Satnav. My house, it's only been built 3 years. It's on Google Maps, but it's not on my Satnav in the car. It's not on my Satnav in the truck. It's been built 3 years. I've been living in it for 2 3/4 years. And they still haven't put it on Satnav. I had a parcel the other week. I'd ordered something from Germany. DHL picked it up in Germany, flew it across to the UK. They handed it over to Parcel Force at Coventry. Coventry shipped it up to Rotherham, to my local Parcel Force depot. Driver, he looked at the address, punched it into his Satnav. It said, no address found. He only went and sent the fucking parcel back to Germany. Wrong address, or incomplete address. I was hopping mad when I got the notification. Phoned them up, I said, you stop that parcel. There's nothing wrong with that address. I've lived there for nearly 3 years. Your second-rate courier is relying on his out-of-date Satnav or his shitty Satnav instead of... Because I used to drive for Parcel Force, so I know the crack. You get given a postcode area. And what I used to do, me and another guy used to share Aylesbury. I was living in Milton Keynes at the time. And so he had one postcode, was it MK16, and I had MK17 or something, I can't remember exactly. And any address that wasn't in my A to Z atlas for Aylesbury, I used to go to the building sites, to the housing developments, and I'd go to the sales office, park my van up, walk in. Hi, my name's Alan. As you can see, I drive for Parcel Force. You're going to have a lot of addresses that are not in my A to Z. Have you got a roadmap that you can give to me? Yep, certainly, Alan. There you go. They'd photocopy the roadmap. It'd have all the road names, some of the house numbers, and I'd write on Barrett, Aylesbury, Redrow, Aylesbury, and I'd keep it with me. And then I could find those addresses. But you see, this is why I can walk into any job. If you want that opportunity, lads, you've got to start understanding that this 45-year-old technology that you think is cutting edge isn't good enough sometimes. And it is hard. If you haven't been brought up using maps, I used to go with my dad in the truck in the school holidays. We used to go tramping for a week. We'd get in the truck, I'd get in the passenger seat, and he'd throw the map at me. It's Phillips Navigator. He said, right, he said, we're going to, I don't know, Strathconnell, Scotland. Find it on the map. So I'd go to the index and I'd look up Strathconnell, and I'd find the page and I'd index it, and there it is. And they'd say, right, which way are we going? So I'd then have to work backwards from there, back to where we were starting, Wakefield. And I'd then tell him which way I think we'd be going. And then he'd correct me. He'd say, yeah, but if we go this way, we can stop at this cafe and have some breakfast. He said, and then we'll carry on, and then we can stop here and have another break, and then we'll go that way because it's nice and pretty, and you get to see the jets practicing up in the Scottish Highlands, and then we'll get up there and do his delivery tomorrow. And it's all those little snippets of information. You know, I'll often take a particular route because it's scenic, or because there's something I want to see, or there's a place I might want to stop. There might be somewhere where I know I can get a good phone signal so I can have a video call with the wife, or something like that. If you just rely on the Satnav boxes, you miss out on so much. You really do. But they do have a place. As I said, I have them. I've got one on my bike, and I do not use it to navigate. I just use it to plot where I've been. Plots my distance, plots everywhere I've been, there's where I've stopped for breaks, and I can highlight where I've taken particular photos, even though my phone, it's all in the metadata. But yeah, just don't rely on it, lads. And if you're just doing a simple job, you know, just use your head. Use your real intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. Right, hope you've enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the comments on this one. Catch you all soon. Ta-ra.